Before we begin today's story, let us know in the comments section what time and part of the world you are listening from. Also, if you enjoy today's story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now, let's begin. The halls of Westbrook Academy echoed with the typical bustle of high school life. But for Vivian Baker and Adrian Walker, these halls held the beginning of an extraordinary love story. It was during their junior year when their paths first crossed in AP Literature class. Vivian, with her radiant brown skin and quick wit, had always stood out among her peers. Her passionate discussions about classic literature caught Adrian's attention long before he gathered the courage to speak to her. Adrian wasn't just another wealthy kid at their prestigious private school. Behind his quiet demeanor and striking gray eyes lay an analytical mind that had already begun developing business concepts. Their first real conversation happened during a group project on Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, an ironic foreshadowing of their own future. "You know," Vivian had said, her eyes twinkling with mischief, "I always thought Romeo and Juliet were rather foolish. There had to be a better way." Adrian had smiled, leaning forward in his chair. "Maybe they were, but when you're in love, logic doesn't always win." Little did they know how prophetic those words would become. Their friendship blossomed naturally, despite the underlying tension between their families. The Baker-Walker rivalry was legendary in the business world. James Baker, Vivian's father, had built Baker Technologies from the ground up, while William Walker's Walker Enterprises had been a generational powerhouse in the tech industry. Their companies had been competing for the same markets for decades, their boardroom battles making regular headlines in the business section. But in the quiet corners of the school library, none of that mattered. Adrian found himself mesmerized by how Vivian's face lit up when she talked about her writing, her dreams of becoming an author. She, in turn, was drawn to his quiet intensity, the way he could break down complex problems with elegant simplicity. Their first kiss happened during the spring of junior year, behind the old oak tree in the school courtyard. It was gentle, tentative, and perfect. That moment marked the beginning of a love that would challenge everything they thought they knew about family loyalty and personal conviction. Senior year brought with it the weight of future decisions. College applications loomed, and the reality of their situation began to surface. Their relationship had remained relatively under the radar, but as college acceptance letters arrived, the pressure mounted. "MIT for you and Stanford for me," Vivian had said one evening, sitting on the swings in their favorite park. "That's quite a distance." Adrian had reached for her hand, his touch warm and reassuring. "Distance is just geography, Viv. What we have is stronger than that." They made their plans meticulously. Daily video calls, regular visits during breaks, and countless text messages would bridge the physical gap. Their friends, particularly Kelvin, Adrian's childhood best friend, helped keep their secret from their families. Kelvin, whose parents were business partners with the Walkers, became their most trusted ally. College brought its own set of challenges. The time difference between Massachusetts and California meant creative scheduling for their calls. There were moments of doubt, tears, and frustrated sighs when missed calls and busy schedules collided, but they persevered. During their sophomore year in college, the first major crisis hit. James Baker, during a family dinner, casually mentioned his plans for Vivian's future. "Senator Richardson's son, Michael, will be taking over their family's political consulting firm," he had announced. "I've arranged for you two to meet during the summer gala." Vivian's fork had clattered against her plate. "Dad, I'm not interested in being arranged with anyone." "Sweetheart, this isn't about interest. This is about securing our family's future. The Richardsons' political connections could give us the edge we need over Walker Enterprises." The argument that followed was explosive. Vivian stormed out of the dinner, her mother's calls echoing behind her. That night, on a tear-filled call with Adrian, their resolve strengthened. Meanwhile, Adrian faced his own battles. A leaked photo of him and Vivian from a secret weekend visit made its way to his father's desk. William Walker's reaction was swift and severe. "Have you lost your mind?" William had roared, throwing the photo onto his desk. "James Baker's daughter? This has to be their play. Get close to us through you. Gather intelligence." "Dad, it's not like that. Vivian isn't—" "End it. End it now, or you can forget about your position in this company. Everything I've built, everything meant for your future, gone." But threats couldn't deter what their hearts had already decided. During their senior year of college, as the pressure from both families reached its peak, they made their boldest move. The Blue Pearl Resort, nestled on a private island off the coast, became their sanctuary. With the help of their closest friends, Kelvin as best man and Sylvia as maid of honor, they planned their escape. The wedding was intimate, beautiful, and perfectly them. Vivian wore a simple white dress that caught the ocean breeze, while Adrian couldn't take his eyes off her as she walked down the beachside aisle. Their vows were personal and heartfelt. "In a world that tried to write our story for us," Vivian had said, her voice strong despite her tears, "we chose to be our own authors." Adrian's response had captured their journey perfectly. "Every obstacle has only proven what I've known since that first conversation. You're worth fighting for, worth losing everything for." The news of their marriage eventually reached their families. The initial reaction was exactly as they'd expected: fury, threats, and attempts to invalidate their union. But something unexpected happened in the weeks that followed. Their love, their determination, and their unwavering commitment to each other gradually wore down the walls of corporate rivalry. It started with their mothers, first Vivian's, then Adrian's, secretly reaching out to their children. Then, during a major market crisis that threatened both companies, James Baker and William Walker found themselves forced to communicate. The breakthrough came during a joint family dinner, arranged by their mothers. Looking at their children's happiness, seeing the potential of united strength rather than divided competition, the parents finally embraced their union. The merger that followed transformed both companies. Baker Walker Technologies became a powerhouse that dominated the market, combining Baker's innovation with Walker's infrastructure. Their love had accomplished what decades of business strategy couldn't: unity, strength, and growth. As they settled into their new life together, their love story became legend in both business and social circles. They were young, Vivian just 23 and Adrian 24, but their love had already moved mountains. Standing on the balcony of their new home, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Adrian wrapped his arms around his wife. "Remember when you said Romeo and Juliet were foolish?" he whispered in her ear. Vivian laughed, leaning back against him. "We proved there was a better way." Their love story had just begun, but they had already written a chapter that would be remembered for generations, a testament to the power of love over rivalry, of personal truth over family expectations, and of the courage to fight for what the heart knows is right. Little did they know that their greatest challenges and deepest sorrows still lay ahead. But in that moment, wrapped in each other's arms, their love felt invincible, capable of overcoming any obstacle that life might throw their way. What they had built was more than just a merger of companies or families. It was a fusion of souls, a testament to the power of true love, and a reminder that sometimes the greatest risks bring the most beautiful rewards. Their story would continue to unfold, with all its joys and sorrows, but this chapter, their defiant dance of love against all odds, would forever remain the foundation of their journey together. The merged Baker Walker Technologies flourished under the new generation's leadership. Adrian's innovative vision, combined with the solid foundation both companies had built, created unprecedented growth. At just 26, Adrian became the youngest CEO in the company's history, taking over from his father, who had decided to step into an advisory role. Vivian's career as a writer also soared. Her debut novel, a compelling story about love transcending societal boundaries, became a bestseller. Their life seemed perfect. Young, successful, and deeply in love. Their morning routine always started with coffee on their penthouse balcony, sharing dreams and plans for the future. "I want at least 3 kids," Vivian had said one morning, her eyes dreamy as she watched the sunrise. "A house full of laughter and chaos." Adrian had kissed her temple, his heart full. "Whatever you want, my love. Though maybe we should start with 1. The news of Vivian's pregnancy came during their 2nd year of marriage. They were ecstatic. Adrian transformed their home office into a nursery, personally supervising every detail. Vivian began writing a children's book, inspired by the life growing within her. It was during a routine prenatal checkup that their world shifted. The doctor had called them both in, his face unusually serious. "We need to discuss your genotype compatibility," he had said, looking at their test results. "Both of you are AS genotype carriers." The implications hit them like a thunderbolt. There was a 25% chance their child could be born with sickle cell disease. They had rushed into marriage, so in love and focused on overcoming family opposition that they had never considered genetic compatibility. "We should have checked," Vivian had whispered later that night, crying in Adrian's arms. "How could we have been so careless?" Adrian held her closer. "We'll face whatever comes together, Viv. Whatever happens, we'll handle it." Walter James Walker was born on a rainy Tuesday morning. He was beautiful, a perfect blend of his parents with Vivian's warm brown skin and Adrian's gray eyes. The first few months were blissful, but then the symptoms began to show. The diagnosis was confirmed. Walter had sickle cell disease. Their lives transformed into a careful ballet of medical appointments, medications, and constant vigilance. Every fever brought panic. Every pain crisis meant rushed hospital visits. Despite the challenges, Walter was a bright, loving child. He inherited his mother's love for stories and his father's analytical mind. On good days, he would sit in Adrian's home office, helping with business proposals. On bad days, Vivian would curl up beside his hospital bed, weaving elaborate tales to distract him from the pain. They adjusted their lives around Walter's needs. Adrian modified his work schedule to be available for hospital visits. Vivian wrote from home, ensuring she could respond to any emergency. Their love grew stronger through the challenges, finding new depths in their shared concern for their son. But watching their child suffer took its toll. Each pain crisis felt like a knife to their hearts. The helplessness of seeing Walter in pain, knowing they couldn't take it away, weighed heavily on them. The final crisis came when Walter was 8. What started as a routine fever escalated quickly. The hospital room became their world for 3 days as doctors fought to stabilize him. But sometimes, love isn't enough to keep someone with you. Walter passed away on a quiet Sunday morning, with both his parents holding his hands. His last words were, "Tell me a story, Mama." The funeral was small, intimate. Walter was buried with his favorite book and the toy stethoscope he used to treat his stuffed animals. The pain was raw, all-consuming, leaving them both struggling to breathe in a world that no longer held their son. Grief changed them in different ways. Adrian threw himself into work, spending longer hours at the office. Perhaps the complex problems of running a corporation were easier to face than the emptiness of their home. The company expanded rapidly under his intense focus, but his chair at the breakfast table remained empty more often than not. Vivian stopped writing. The words that had once flowed so easily became trapped behind a wall of pain. She spent hours in Walter's room, which they couldn't bring themselves to change, holding his favorite teddy bear and trying to remember how to breathe. Their once vibrant love began to show cracks. Conversations became shorter, touches less frequent. They were both drowning in their grief, but couldn't find a way to help each other surface. "I miss you," Vivian had said one night, when Adrian came home late again. "I feel like I lost both of you that day." Adrian had stood in the doorway, his tie loose around his neck. "I'm right here, Viv." "Are you? Because it feels like you're anywhere but here." They tried therapy. Dr. Sarah Matthews saw them twice a week, attempting to help them bridge the growing chasm between them. But even in therapy, they struggled to connect. "Grief is individual," Dr. Matthews had explained. "There's no right or wrong way to mourn." But understanding didn't make it easier. Their different ways of grieving pulled them in opposite directions. Adrian's immersion in work left Vivian feeling abandoned in her pain. Vivian's need to preserve Walter's memory, keeping his room untouched, made it harder for Adrian to heal. Their intimate life suffered too. Vivian couldn't bear the thought of trying for another child, fear paralyzing her at the mere suggestion. Their passionate love life dwindled to occasional, almost mechanical encounters, before stopping altogether. Then came Olivia John, a brilliant business strategist who joined the company as head of international operations. She worked closely with Adrian on the company's expansion plans. Her presence became a source of unspoken tension. Vivian noticed the late-night strategy meetings, the business dinners, the way Olivia's name appeared more frequently in Adrian's conversations. She never voiced her suspicions, perhaps because she wasn't sure she had the right to, given how much she had withdrawn from their marriage. What Vivian didn't know was that Adrian never saw Olivia as anything more than a colleague. Yes, Olivia harbored feelings for him, but Adrian remained faithful, his heart still bound to Vivian despite their growing distance. The long hours at work were his way of running from the grief that threatened to overwhelm him at home. Their friend group noticed the change. Kelvin especially tried to bridge the gap, organizing dinners and events to bring them together. But even these became awkward affairs, with conversations staying safely in shallow waters to avoid the deep pain underneath. Their 10th wedding anniversary passed without celebration. The date fell on a particularly difficult day. It would have been Walter's 9th birthday. Adrian spent it in back-to-back meetings, while Vivian visited their son's grave alone. That night, lying in their too large bed, with Adrian's side cold and empty, Vivian made a decision. Their love, once strong enough to overcome family opposition and corporate rivalry, had become a casualty of their grief. Perhaps it was time to let go. She began researching divorce lawyers the next day, tears falling on her keyboard as she typed. The vibrant love story that had started in high school hallways seemed to be reaching its final chapter. Their house, once filled with love and laughter, became a museum of what was lost, not just their son, but the love that had defied all odds to bring them together. Photos of happier times lined the walls, mocking what they had become. Walter's room remained unchanged, a shrine to their greatest joy and deepest pain. Adrian noticed the change in Vivian, the way she stopped trying to wait up for him, how she no longer asked about his day, but he felt powerless to bridge the gap. How could he comfort her when he couldn't even face his own grief? Their last attempt at therapy ended with silence. Dr. Matthews had asked them to share what they missed most about their relationship. "I miss us," Vivian had said simply, tears streaming down her face. "I miss who we were before we lost ourselves in grief." Adrian had remained silent, his own pain choking any words he might have said. The thread of their love, once strong enough to bind two rival families, had frayed under the weight of their loss. Each carried their grief differently, creating a distance that seemed impossible to cross. Their love story, which had begun with such promise and defiance, appeared to be ending not with a bang, but with the quiet whisper of separate lives. But sometimes, even in the darkest moments, love finds a way to rewrite its own ending. Their story wasn't over. It was merely waiting for the right moment to turn the page to a new chapter. Neither of them could have guessed that fate, which had brought them together in their youth, wasn't done with them yet. As Vivian prepared to suggest divorce, and Adrian buried himself deeper in work, their friends were already setting in motion events that would force them to confront not just their grief, but the love that still lingered beneath the surface of their pain. Their journey wasn't ending. It was about to take an unexpected turn at a familiar island resort, where their love story had first been officially sealed. The autumn air carried a chill that seemed to mirror the coldness that had settled between Vivian and Adrian. After months of internal struggle, Vivian had finally made her decision. She moved to Seattle, needing space to breathe, to think, to heal. The rainy city suited her mood, its constant drizzle matching the tears she couldn't seem to stop. Her new apartment overlooked Puget Sound, worlds away from the penthouse she had shared with Adrian in New York. Here, she slowly began to write again, pouring her pain into words that would eventually become her most powerful work yet, a novel about loss, grief, and the complexity of love. The divorce papers sat in her lawyer's office for weeks before she found the courage to have them sent to Adrian. Each line felt like a eulogy to their love story. Their marriage, which had begun with such passionate defiance, was ending with quiet resignation. Meanwhile, Adrian threw himself even deeper into work, if that was possible. The office became his sanctuary, his shelter from the emptiness of their home. He hadn't touched Walter's room since Vivian left, couldn't bear to see the carefully preserved space that held so many memories. Then came the wedding invitation. Kelvin, Adrian's best friend since childhood and best man at their wedding, was finally marrying Sylvia, who had been Vivian's bridesmaid. The invitation wasn't just for the wedding. It was for a week-long celebration at the Blue Pearl Resort, the very place where Adrian and Vivian had exchanged their vows about a decade ago. "I can't go," was Adrian's immediate response when Kelvin brought it up. Kelvin, now a major stakeholder in Baker Walker Technologies, hadn't taken no for an answer. "You're my best man, Adrian. Besides, I own the resort now. If you don't come, I'll reconsider our entire business partnership." It was an empty threat, and they both knew it, but it spoke to how serious Kelvin was about Adrian's attendance. Vivian had received a similar call from Sylvia. "The resort's different now," Sylvia had said softly. "Maybe seeing it changed will help you both move forward, whatever that means." The week-long celebration would bring together their old friend group, 9 people who had been there from the beginning. 4 women and 5 men who had witnessed their love story unfold, who had supported their elopement, who had grieved with them when they lost Walter. Vivian agreed to attend on one condition. Adrian would sign the divorce papers after they returned. She had her lawyer send them to his office, where they sat in his drawer, waiting for his signature. The resort was indeed different. Kelvin had transformed it into an even more luxurious destination while maintaining its intimate charm. As Vivian stepped onto the familiar beach, memories washed over her like the gentle waves lapping at the shore. Here was where she had walked down the aisle. There was where they had their first dance under the stars. Adrian arrived last, his corporate mask firmly in place, but even he couldn't deny the pull of memories as he walked through the resort. Every corner held echoes of their love story. The first few days were awkward. Their friend group tried to maintain normalcy, but the tension between Adrian and Vivian was palpable. They moved around each other like careful dancers, maintaining a safe distance while stealing glances when they thought no one was looking. The group activities helped break the ice somewhat. Beach volleyball, hiking expeditions, and evening bonfires created a semblance of their old dynamic. During these moments, glimpses of their former selves would shine through. Adrian's rare smile when Vivian made a particularly witty comment. Vivian's lingering look when Adrian laughed at something Kelvin said. One evening, during a game of Never Have I Ever, the atmosphere shifted. When it was Vivian's turn, she looked directly at Adrian for the first time in days. "Never have I ever cheated," she said quietly. Adrian's cup remained untouched. Their eyes met across the circle, and for a moment, the years of pain and misunderstanding seemed to clear. He had never betrayed their love, despite what she might have feared about him and Olivia. The real turning point came 2 days before the wedding. Kelvin asked Adrian to check the wine cellar for a specific vintage champagne he wanted for the reception. "The directions are simple," Kelvin said, handing Adrian a hastily scribbled note. "Just follow the path past the new garden, Take the service elevator down, and it's the third door on the left." The directions, of course, were deliberately confusing. After Adrian had been gone for 20 minutes, Kelvin turned to Vivian. "Could you please help him? He's probably lost. The cellar's massive, and I need that champagne count tonight." Vivian tried texting Adrian first, but received no response. Kelvin had quietly pocketed Adrian's phone earlier. With a sigh, she followed Kelvin's directions to the wine cellar. The massive wooden door creaked as she pushed it open. The cellar was indeed impressive, rows upon rows of wine bottles gleaming in the soft lighting, with a beautiful island counter in the center. Adrian sat there, a glass of red wine in hand, looking surprisingly relaxed for someone who was supposedly lost. "Don't let the door," he started to say, but it was too late. The heavy door swung shut behind her with a definitive click. "Close," Adrian finished with a slight smile. "It locks automatically." Vivian's heart raced as she realized the situation. She pulled out her phone, only to find no signal. Adrian watched her pace around, trying to find reception, before finally speaking. "Kelvin set us up," he said, pouring another glass of wine. "Want some? It's that Bordeaux you loved on our honeymoon." After exhausting all possible escape routes, Vivian finally accepted the glass. They sat in silence initially, the weight of years of unspoken words hanging between them. "Why did you think I was cheating?" Adrian finally asked, his voice soft but clear in the quiet cellar. Vivian stared into her wine glass. "You were never home. Always with Olivia, always working. It was easier to believe you'd found someone else than to accept that you'd simply stopped loving me." "I never stopped loving you." Adrian's voice cracked. I didn't know how to love you through the grief. Every time I looked at you, I saw Walter. Saw our pain. Work was easier than facing that." The dam broke. Years of suppressed emotions poured out in that wine cellar. They talked about Walter really talked about him for the first time since his death. About the way he would scrunch his nose when he laughed. How he insisted on wearing his Superman cape to doctor's appointments because it made him feel brave. "Remember when he decided he wanted to be a doctor and started treating all his stuffed animals?" Vivian smiled through her tears. Adrian laughed softly. "He made me buy him a toy stethoscope and insisted on checking my heart every morning before work. He said he had to make sure your heart was strong enough for meetings." Their laughter turned to tears, then back to laughter. The wine flowed, and with it, their words became freer, more honest. "I failed you," Adrian admitted. "When you needed me most, I ran away into work. I couldn't bear to see your pain because it magnified my own." "We both failed each other," Vivian replied. "I was so lost in my grief that I forgot we were supposed to help each other through it." The physical distance between them had gradually decreased as they talked. Now, they sat close enough that their shoulders touched. The familiar electricity between them, dulled by years of pain but never quite extinguished, began to spark again. "I miss you," Adrian whispered, his hand finding hers on the counter. "Not just now, but every day since you left. Every morning I wake up reaching for you." Vivian turned to face him, tears glistening in her eyes. "Adrian." He kissed her then, softly at first, then with increasing passion, as years of suppressed love and longing broke through their carefully constructed walls. She responded with equal fervor, her hands finding their way into his hair, pulling him closer. "We shouldn't," she murmured against his lips. "We're getting divorced." "I know," he replied, pressing soft kisses along her jaw. "Just this last time. Let me love you one last time, and I'll sign the papers when we get back." Their lovemaking was different from their younger days. Slower, deeper, laden with years of history and emotion. Every touch carried the weight of their shared past and the bitter sweetness of what they believed to be their final intimacy. Afterward, they held each other in comfortable silence, their bodies curved together as naturally as they had always been. The wine cellar, with its soft lighting and rows of bottles, had become a confessional, a place of healing, and now, a sanctuary for their reconnection. Sorry to cut in, but I noticed 90% of our viewers watch our stories till the end, but eventually forget to subscribe. Please, if you're enjoying our story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It helps our stories get recommended to more hearts across the globe. Thank you. Now, back to our story. The spell broke when Vivian's phone suddenly chimed with incoming messages. Signal had returned. Sylvia's worried texts flooded in, followed by a call. They quickly dressed, straightening their clothes and hair just before Kelvin and Sylvia arrived to rescue them. The knowing look in Kelvin's eyes told them he had orchestrated the entire thing, but neither could find it in themselves to be angry. Something had shifted between them, something profound and undeniable. The remaining days of the wedding celebration took on a different tone. Though they maintained their distance in public, their eyes would meet across rooms with new understanding. During Kelvin and Sylvia's ceremony, held on the same beach where they had once exchanged their own vows, both found themselves fighting tears for reasons that had nothing to do with the wedding they were attending. As they prepared to return to their separate lives, Vivian to Seattle, Adrian to New York, the weight of their wine cellar confession hung between them. The divorce papers waited in Adrian's office drawer, but now they carried a different significance. Their friends watched them say goodbye at the resort, hoping their plan had worked but unsure of the outcome. What they couldn't see was the way Adrian's hand lingered on Vivian's when he helped her with her luggage, or the way Vivian's eyes held a question she wasn't ready to ask. They parted without promises, without declarations, but with something new growing in the space where grief had lived for so long. Their love story, which had begun in high school halls and survived family opposition, had found a new chapter in a wine cellar. Whether this chapter would lead to reconciliation or a gentler ending remained to be seen, but for the first time in years, both felt the stirring of hope. As their separate planes took off from the island, both carried with them the taste of wine, the echo of confessions, and the memory of a love that refused to die quietly. Sometimes, they both realized, the hardest part of love isn't fighting for it. It's learning how to find your way back to it after loss has led you astray. Back in his New York office, Adrian stared at the divorce papers lying on his mahogany desk. The morning sun filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the document that would officially end their marriage. His fountain pen felt unusually heavy in his hand as memories of their wine cellar encounter flooded his mind. The taste of Bordeaux on her lips, the familiar curve of her body against his, the way her eyes had sparkled in the cellar's dim light. For over an hour, he paced his office, occasionally stopping to look at the papers, then resuming his restless movement. Finally, with a heavy heart, he signed. His signature looked foreign to him, shaky, uncertain, unlike his usual confident strokes. He sent the papers to Vivian's lawyer, then buried himself in work, trying to ignore the hollow feeling in his chest. Meanwhile, in Seattle, Vivian was facing her own crisis. The morning sickness had started 2 weeks after returning from the resort. At first, she attributed it to stress, but as days passed, the reality became impossible to ignore. The pregnancy test in her bathroom confirmed what her body had been trying to tell her. She was carrying Adrian's child. The irony wasn't lost on her. Their first child had brought them the greatest joy and deepest sorrow. Now, just as they were finalizing their divorce, fate had given them another chance at parenthood. She sat on her bathroom floor, tears streaming down her face, torn between joy and terror. What if, she whispered to herself, the unfinished question hanging in the air. What if this child also inherited their genetic curse? What if she had to watch another child suffer? What if she had to go through that loss again? For days, she wrestled with the decision of whether to tell Adrian. She wrote countless emails, dialed his number numerous times, only to delete the drafts and end the calls before they connected. How could she burden him with this when they'd just signed their divorce papers? How could she risk putting him through the potential heartbreak again? Her doctor, Dr. Ben Williams, became her confidant during these uncertain times. A specialist in high-risk pregnancies, he understood her fears and provided both medical expertise and emotional support. "We can perform genetic testing," he had suggested during one of her appointments. "Find out the baby's genotype early." But Vivian had refused. Part of her wasn't ready to face another potential heartbreak, while another part held on to a desperate hope that somehow, this time would be different. Fate, however, had its own plans. 3 months into her pregnancy, Baker Walker Technologies opened a new office in Seattle. Adrian, as CEO, was required to oversee the launch personally. He had no idea that Vivian had moved to the same city, having lost touch with her after sending the signed divorce papers. It was a crisp autumn morning when their paths crossed again. Vivian was walking with Dr. Williams, discussing her latest ultrasound results, when she spotted Adrian across the street. Her heart stopped. He looked exactly as she remembered. Tall, distinguished in his tailored suit, but there was a weariness in his stance that hadn't been there before. Adrian saw them at the same moment. His world tilted on its axis as he took in the sight of Vivian, her flowing dress doing little to hide her growing belly, walking companionably close to a handsome man. His heart clenched painfully. She had moved on, was starting a family with someone else. Ever the businessman, Adrian plastered on his most convincing smile and crossed the street to greet them. "Vivian," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "What a surprise." Vivian felt faint, the stress of the moment overwhelming her. Dr. Williams noticed her swaying slightly and steadied her with a concerned hand on her elbow. "Congratulations," Adrian continued, nodding toward her belly, each word feeling like glass in his throat. "You look happy." The world started spinning around Vivian. The last thing she heard was Adrian's alarmed voice calling her name before everything went black. She awoke in a hospital room, the steady beep of monitors filling the air. Adrian sat in a chair beside her bed, his tie loosened, hair disheveled from running his hands through it countless times. Dr. Williams stood at the foot of her bed, updating her chart. "The baby's fine," Dr. Williams assured her before she could ask. "Just a stress reaction. Though, I must say, Mrs. Walker, this might be a good time to share what you've been keeping to yourself." Adrian's head snapped up. "What do you mean?" Dr. Williams looked between them, suddenly understanding the situation. "I'll give you two some privacy. Call if you need anything." He left, closing the door softly behind him. The silence in the room was deafening. Adrian stared at Vivian, realization slowly dawning in his eyes. "How far along are you?" he asked quietly. Vivian couldn't meet his gaze. 3 months. "The resort," he whispered, doing the math in his head. "The wine cellar." Tears spilled down Vivian's cheeks. "I'm sorry. I was going to tell you, but then the divorce papers came, and I was scared." "Scared?" Adrian moved to sit on the edge of her bed, taking her hand in his. "Of what?" "Of everything. Of losing another child. Of watching you suffer through that again. Of having to be strong when I feel so weak." Adrian's free hand cupped her face, thumb wiping away her tears. "You thought you had to protect me. Vivian, we're supposed to face these things together. That was our problem before, trying to protect each other instead of supporting each other. But what if?" She couldn't finish the sentence. "Then we'll face it together," he said firmly. "I'm not running away this time. No more burying myself in work. No more separate grieving. Whatever happens, we face it as one." He moved closer, resting his forehead against hers. Fresh tears fell, but these were different tears of relief, of hope, of love renewed. Adrian gathered her in his arms, careful of her belly, and held her as she cried. "Move back to New York," he whispered into her hair. "Or I'll move here. I don't care which. I just want us to be together." The months that followed were a mixture of joy and anxiety. They decided to stay in Seattle, with Adrian managing the company remotely and flying to New York when necessary. They bought a house together. A beautiful craftsman with a view of the Sound and a room perfect for a nursery. This time, their pregnancy journey was different. They attended every doctor's appointment together, held each other through the anxiety of each test, celebrated every little milestone. Their friends and family rallied around them, especially Kelvin and Sylvia, who took full credit for their reunion. That wine cellar setup was pure genius. Kelvin would boast at every opportunity. The delivery room was tense with anticipation. Adrian never left Vivian's side, holding her hand through every contraction, whispering words of encouragement and love. When their daughter finally arrived, crying loudly and perfectly healthy, they both broke down in tears. "She's beautiful," Adrian whispered, cradling his daughter while sitting next to Vivian's bed. "She looks just like you." Their daughter, whom they named Hope, had Vivian's beautiful brown skin tone and Adrian's gray eyes, whom a perfect blend of them both. But more importantly, her genetic test results showed she was AA genotype. The curse that had taken Walter from them had not touched their daughter. They married again 6 months later, a small, intimate ceremony in their backyard. Hope wore a tiny flower crown and was carried down the aisle by Kelvin, who took his role as godfather very seriously. Sylvia, heavily pregnant herself, stood as matron of honor. This time, their vows were different, tempered by experience, strengthened by adversity, but no less loving. "I promise to face whatever comes our way together," Adrian said, his voice thick with emotion. "No more running, no more hiding. You and Hope are my world, and I will spend the rest of my life showing you both how much you mean to me." Vivian's vows were equally moving. "Our love story isn't perfect. It's messy and complicated and has known both incredible joy and devastating pain. But that's what makes it real. I promise to love you through all of it, the good, the bad, and everything in between." Their kiss was sweet and tender, Hope giggling in Kelvin's arms as she watched her parents seal their renewed commitment to each other. Life settled into a new rhythm. Adrian found a better balance between work and family, making sure to be home for dinner every night, never missing a moment of Hope's growth. Vivian started writing again, her experiences inspiring a new series of books that touched readers' hearts worldwide. Their home was filled with laughter again. Hope grew into a vivacious little girl who loved stories as much as her mother and had her father's analytical mind. She would often sit in Adrian's home office, just as Walter had done, helping with his work. The memory, instead of bringing pain, now brought smiles tinged with sweet nostalgia. They kept Walter's memory alive for Hope, telling her stories about her big brother in heaven. His room, which had remained unchanged for so long, was finally transformed into a memorial space 12th, a peaceful room filled with photos and memories where they could all go to feel close to him. One evening, as they sat on their back porch watching Hope play in the garden, Adrian squeezed Vivian's hand. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" "For giving us another chance, for being brave enough to love again, even when it was scary." Vivian leaned her head on his shoulder, watching their daughter chase butterflies in the fading sunlight. "Love isn't about being fearless," she replied. "It's about finding someone worth facing your fears with." Their love story had come full circle, from high school sweethearts defying their families, through the depths of loss and grief, to finding their way back to each other and building a new life together. It wasn't a perfect fairy tale. It was better. It was real, with all the complexity and depth that real love entails. Hope's laughter echoed through their garden, a sound that reminded them daily of life's ability to surprise you with joy just when you think all hope is lost. Their love had been tested by family opposition, distance, loss, and grief, but had emerged stronger, deeper, and more resilient than ever. They had learned that sometimes love needs a second chance to get it right, that healing comes not from forgetting the past, but from facing it together, and that hope, both the feeling and their daughter, Parsons, has the power to light the way forward through even the darkest times. As the sun set over Seattle, casting their world in soft golden light, Adrian and Vivian held each other close, their daughter's laughter providing the perfect soundtrack to their renewed love story. They had finally found their way back to each other, and this time, they were never letting go. Their story became a testament to the power of enduring love, not the kind that exists only in fairy tales, but the kind that grows stronger through adversity, that learns from mistakes, that chooses to try again even when it's scared. It was a love that had matured like fine wine, gaining depth and complexity with time, becoming richer and more precious with each passing day. And in the end, that was the greatest lesson of their journey. That true love isn't about perfect moments or fairy tale endings, but about choosing each other every day, through every challenge, and finding beauty in the imperfect, messy, wonderful reality of building a life together.